Hello and welcome to this episode of the Game Plan podcast by College Baseball Advisors. On this podcast, we interview mostly college coaches, but a variety of other players and coaches at different levels as well. And we talk everything from their journey through baseball, their development, of course, always about the recruiting process. My background is 30 years as a college baseball coach. I'm now a current baseball recruiting advisor. For more information about what I do and to book a no obligation call, please visit my website, collegebaseballadvisor.com. On today's episode, we had Tyler Kavanaugh. Tyler is the associate head coach at GW, and also, I believe, the first coach I've had on the podcast that I actually coached with in 2011, 2012 at Sacred Heart University. So we talked about his background and his journey through playing baseball and getting recruited at Kenyon College, where he was a starter 4 years as a catcher, and then his experience getting into coaching at the various places he was at. SUNY Purchase, he was at DeSales, then came to Sacred Heart. He coached at Marist, Hofstra, Stony Brook, where he transitioned to being a pitching coach there, and then he's been at GW since 2001, where he's pitching coach and associate head coach. So we covered a lot of stuff about his background, but really some insight in terms of the development, the recruiting process, and what it takes to be successful as a baseball player at the college level. Hopefully, you'll hear his dry sense of humor. He's extremely, extremely funny in his particular style. I love always listening and talking with him because it's really, a great experience. I think you'll really enjoy this podcast. I'd like to remind you that this is made possible. This podcast through the sponsorship of the World Baseball Coaches Convention, which takes place every January at the Mohegan Sun Casino in Connecticut. This year, the dates are January 15th to 17th, 2026. If you have been to this event, you don't need me to tell you how great it is. If you have not been, especially if you're a coach in the greater New England area, high school coach, it's an unbelievable venue to come to with great speakers. Even the people in the audience, there's a lot of baseball knowledge, gets you fired up on baseball. The vendors are all baseball related. There's a batting cage that's a demo space. There's an infield demo. So it's a really great opportunity to learn baseball, talk baseball. Go to their website, baseballcoachesclinic.com. And without further delay, here's my conversation with Tyler Kavanaugh, Associate Head Baseball Coach at GW. All right, Cav. So as we were saying before I hit the record button, this is your very first podcast,
First
which makes
time.
me, yeah, it makes me very pleased that I'm the guy that gets the first podcast to you. And I know, you don't wake up every day going, gee, I'd like to get on people's podcasts. That's not how you roll. So in all seriousness, I do appreciate you joining me. And then, of course, that's a nice sick backdrop we got looking out at a baseball field. That's pretty good. And there's a lot
Yeah,
of
yeah.
yeah, a lot of dudes I've interviewed don't have that as a backdrop. So that's a pretty nice
We
setup.
are very, very fortunate from some very generous alumni and a very supportive athletic department. That's really, really nice setup here for sure.
Yeah, we'll definitely get to the GW stuff. I always start off when I do these because everyone that I've had on is a baseball person. So I know you're a baseball person, and I know a lot about you. You're the first guy also I think that I've coached with that I've had on this podcast. So that's kind of cool. But I know, of course, growing up, you're a baseball guy. Did you play a bunch of other sports, like either informally or formally as you were growing up?
I did through middle school, not very well, not very well. I raised by a single mother and two grandparents, and my grandfather didn't mince words. I think he saw me play one middle school basketball game and told me it was tough to watch. But I played some rec ice hockey, basketball, soccer, things like that. But once I got to high school, it was just baseball, and it wasn't. I think from a specialization standpoint, I think it was just limited athleticism, and found my niche, fortunately.
Did you know early on, let's say by high school, and correct me if I'm wrong, you went to Stepinac part of the time and St. Luke's part of the time, right?
Yeah, so I was at Stepinac into my senior year, and there really wasn't many college options. College wasn't a foregone conclusion for me at the time, and met another great Connecticut baseball guy named Mitchell Hoffman, who was coaching over at St. Luke's at the time, and they were ahead of their time with putting together these kind of super prep school teams, and they had a lot of really talented players. They just needed somebody to hit seventh and catch. So I was very lucky to be provided that opportunity to go and actually transfer in October of my senior year in as a junior. So I was 20 years ahead of the reclassification curve. and attended St. Luke's and finished up my high school career there.
So that's a really good, first of all, Mitch, awesome baseball guy. His son Maddox committed to Northwestern as a
Sure.
catcher and also a tremendous quarterback football player, that kid. But um, when you were at Stepanak, was the goal at that point, hey, I want to play college baseball, or was it not like at the forefront of your brain at that point?
I definitely wanted to keep playing. I think I was probably delusional like a lot of 17-year-olds and was waiting for LSU or Clemson to call.
Right.
But from a, from an academic standpoint, I did well in school, but it just, I ended up ultimately being the first person in my family to attend college. So as I said, it wasn't like a foregone conclusion that you have to go to college. So that extra year was pivotal in creating a really exciting opportunity, ultimately out in Ohio at Kenyon College.
So I'm laughing because I love yours. You got the best sense of humor. I love you would if you would have went the stand-up comic route, you would have actually killed it as a
Yeah,
stand-up
maybe.
comic.
Yeah.
But as I meet with guys like in the recruiting world that I'm in now, and I'll get a kid who's pretty good, have a first time talk with him, and I'm like, "Yo, tell me some schools you're interested in," and he's like, "Well, LSU." I go, "Dude, you would get cut from the club team at LSU."
Sure.
Like people don't, they just don't get it, which we'll talk about after. But so. Was it so now you're at St. Luke's? Um, how did that connection? I know, obviously, of course, you went to Kenyon, and I've had Burdett on, and he speaks so highly of you. But like, how in the world did this kid from Connecticut find his way out there?
So actually, a gentleman by the name of Dan Hodgson, who was an alum, ended up staying on and coaching there. Danny's from Fairfield, Connecticut, and he was coaching in the Connecticut Blue Jays organization that I played in their inaugural season for Kevin Huber and Pat Hall. And so Danny had seen me and had invited us out for a visit, and kind of the rest is history. And in such a small world, Danny ended up coaching, leaving Kenyon after my second year, going down to Georgia College State University, and then ultimately was an assistant at GW. Um,
Wow.
yeah, under the last head coach here. So it was interesting how that kind of came full circle. But yeah, Danny had seen me play and recruited me to go to Kenyon, and it was I was very, very lucky to be given that opportunity.
Do you remember back then? Like, what do you think might have been your path had this guy not seen you and liked you and moved that forward? Like, were you going to play no matter what? Did you have other options you were considering, or was this just like, hey, a great stroke of luck for you?
Yeah, I mean, it was, I was very fortunate. I had discussed with, somebody very close to me the opportunity maybe going into a junior college, a community college, just from a financial standpoint. The other school at the time was another Division III school in Westchester County, Manhattanville. And unfortunately, that the financial aid package wasn't nearly enough to make it viable for my mom to pay. And Kenyon was just like I said, I blessed is an understatement that I was able to attend a college like that on some really great financial aid.
So, again, I've had Burdett on, so we've have talked about Kenyon, anyone that follows this. But if you walk down the street, at least here in Connecticut, you say Kenyon, not a lot of people know it. This is an unbelievable, gorgeous, great liberal arts school, highly ranked. Was your experience there awesome?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I had an unbelievable time. I got to play every day. It was my Vanderbilt. It was my Yankees.
Yep.
And that's something I try to pass along to these guys in the recruiting process and what guys we look for. We want GW to be your Valhalla. I mean, this is where you
Right.
want to be. So I never took that opportunity lightly, and it meant a lot to be there. And I was around some really talented players. I was just a kind of a cog in the wheel. Again, caught hitting the bottom of the order, tried to not screw things up offensively. And it was our recruiting class, the fellow guys in my class that ended up staying together for the 4 years. And I think the program was able to move forward in those 4 years and has been very solid since. So no regrets. It was transformative for me in a lot of ways.
And it's interesting because, maybe this will come up later, we'll see, but it seems more only Division threes are where these coaches have the such longevity. I mean, Burdett's been there, I want to say now he's in his 29th, maybe 30th year. you guys seem to have a really good relationship from the outside. Is that accurate? You guys have
Yeah,
remained
I mean,
close?
yeah, it was. I mean, to say he changed the course of my life again would be an understatement. And he'll tell you, and we'll save it for off air, but it was a bit of a culture shock coming from my background and going out to a school like that, and there were some bumps in the road and some, I guess you'd call them growth moments now. And I think he'll tell you some of his gray hair was probably because of me in the early 2000s. But just an unbelievable human being, a tremendous baseball coach, but a real mentor and a reason why I wanted to get into this profession.
Oh, so that's perfect, which is like literally in my notes was that next question. As you entered Kenyon, and listen, I've had coaches on here that didn't think about coaching until they got out of college, did an accounting job, and go, this stinks. And other guys that grew up knowing they wanted to do it. Would it be fair to say when you entered college, you weren't really thinking at that point, well, I can't wait to be a coach someday? So I
So
guess,
I had the opportunity again with the Connecticut Blue Jays with under Kevin Huber and Pat Hall the summer going into my freshman year. I had helped out. I guess you almost call it an apprenticeship now.
right.
I was able to coach a really talented 14 and under team, which had some really, really good players. One of which actually being a young George Springer.
Wow.
So going down and playing at Disney and the AAU national championship and all that stuff. And so I wouldn't say what I did was coach. I probably got guys picked off at first base and probably was just another guy for Huber to coach along with the 14-year-olds. But that's where being around those guys and being in that environment is probably what really started to pique my interest. And like everybody, when you come to the realization that the Yankees aren't going to draft an average Division III catcher, you start to find ways that you can stay in the game.
It's funny too. There's a couple of times in my coaching career where I've definitely been way off on looking at other guys. I never thought Chris Sale would make it after we played them when he was at Florida Gulf Coast. I was wrong there. And then I remember watching George Springer at UConn going, this dude's going to have to cut it down with two strikes or he ain't going to be a pro. Well, yeah, he's never cut it down and
Right.
he's pretty darn good, you know?
It's
So,
unbelievable. Yeah, it's a
yeah.
blast. And the, the guys that coached him that I still know that are still in contact with him to hear what an unbelievable human being he is and stuff he does off the field. It's awesome to see that success he's had. What an incredible career.
Was it, I mean, maybe you weren't thinking about it that young, but when you were coaching him, was he completely different from other kids at that point? Or,
Yeah, I
yeah.
think in retrospect, I think you look back and some of those markers, the athleticism, the fast twitch, the ball just sounding different coming off his bat. I don't say everybody was saying he's going to be an all-time great or a World Series hero, but obviously the athleticism was unmistakable, and he moved different, he looked different, he did things differently than other kids his age.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. All right, so back to you now. I know you start your coaching career, correct me if I'm wrong, I think I have the timeline down, at Purchase.
Yep.
Was Adam Tarasca was first of all, was he there at that point?
No, no. Bill
Oh, it
Guerrero
wasn't.
was the head coach, and
Oh, okay.
yeah, I had come back. I actually after I graduated, I went out to the Czech Republic. There was a playing opportunity out there. Was not professional baseball, but they at least covered some costs, and I had a little bit of a stipend. So I got to extend my career, if you want to call it that, by a couple months and see if in part of the world I'll probably never get back to. And then when I came back, I was substitute teaching, trying to figure out what's next, and the SUNY purchase assistant job was on the ABCA website and had reached out and Bill took a chance on me. And
Oh,
I
that's
think,
funny. Yeah, that's right.
yeah,
Because I was thinking, of course, Huber and Hall and Tarasca
right.
and all that. So, and then you stayed at Purchase for what, about two
I was there
years?
2 years. Yeah,
Yeah.
two years, and then Coach Tim Nyman, another Hall of Famer. And that's kind of the theme of I think from my coaching journey has just been I've been absolutely spoiled to be around some absolute just titans of this industry and Tim Nyman over at DeSales, who just retired after
Yes,
a
just
remarkable
retired.
career.
Yep.
He hired me to replace his son who had taken another job, and it was a really big step for me to go to a solidified, legitimate, regional power at the Division III level.
Back to just Purchase for a minute. How was the transition, the beginning of your college coaching career? Were you hooked right away? Were you frustrated by like any, and listen, that's a pretty legit, I don't know if they have the same facilities they do now years later, but what do you remember back to like your first college coaching job?
Well, it was probably the third year of that program's existence, so it's very much in its infancy. And we're playing the old Westburys and the Farmingdale States. And I remember we went down and took a southern trip where we went down and played LaGrange and Emory. So it
Yeah.
was, you realize where you're at in the world pretty quickly. And again, I think like a lot of guys that get started, it was a lot of fire and brimstone, and I yelled more than I coached, and probably thought intimidation was better than inspiration. And I'd probably shudder if I really went through my coaching philosophies all the way back then. But it was a great bunch of kids, and Bill Guerrero gave me more responsibility than I had any business having. That early in my career. So I learned probably a lot what to do by screwing some things up, probably pretty mightily.
But you know what, though? Again, I've done a lot of these with really good coaches, and that to a man, almost everybody says that. Like,
Yeah,
because think about it. Interestingly enough, in this career, and if you go to Morgan Stanley, there's almost like there's a way they're going to teach you how to work. When you get in a
right,
coaching job, there's really not a lot of you have your boss, but there's no
right.
manual, so you're learning on the fly. And interestingly enough, back to DeSales with Nyman, kind of like we were talking about Burdett. Here's a guy that spent 35 years or
Yeah,
so that he was at DeSales and built a heck of a program there.
unbelievable.
Unbelievable. If I have the timeline right, it was from DeSales that you then came to Sacred Heart,
I
correct?
did, yeah, 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 yeah. I remember sitting in the lobby of the Pitt Center, almost begging G for the job. It didn't pay very much at the time, and I think he was, as you know, I mean, the care factor of that man is unprecedented, and I think he was genuinely worried that I wanted to move up with my fiance at the time, my wife now. And make the move from Pennsylvania for the salary. Little did he know it was probably three times what I was making at the previous stop. But yeah, no, I mean, again, he took a chance on me, and forever changed my life in a really positive way.
But do you remember this many years later? Like, how did that come about? Was that something you were, hey, I'm ready to get my hands in Division 1? Was it a connection? Was it a job opening?
Yeah, yeah. It was again. You'll hear these names a lot, and without them, I don't know where I'd be. And Kevin Huber and Pat Hall,
Awesome.
really knowing that the Connecticut baseball scene really well, and they mentioned that there was a position open, and both those guys reached out on my behalf. So they allowed me at least get my foot in the door and have a sit down with Coach G.
So, this is where I'll take over for a little bit. So, in our time, we coached together. I mean, of course, you started there, not only coaching, but you had an equipment job.
Right.
This is what I learned about Tyler Kavanaugh very quickly. The man works his ass off. I mean, you were just built to work. You're a hustle. You're always, I mean, especially recruiting wise, but in every real capacity too. Of course, when you were at Sacred Heart, we had a couple of good years during those couple of years. I mean, back-to-back regionals that we went to. Um, Obviously, you talked about Coach G, who I see all the time now. Retired. The guy plays harmonica. He'll text me all the time, "Come to my gig," which I do on a fair
Right.
amount. Um, Again, I always feel funny asking questions for someone to recap, a couple of years at a place. But what's the takeaway of what you remember about your time at Sacred Heart?
It just what a tremendous manager of people he was, and it just motivator. And I would always get a little resentful because you'd hear people say, "Oh, you guys got lucky again," because maybe on paper we weren't the most talented, or we had some roadblocks. Maybe it wasn't as a sexy of a program as some other ones in the league. But I think obviously, and the job you did with the pitching staff with those years I was there was incredible. But I thought, I think you could put Nick Giaquinto in any leadership role, and that organization is going to be successful. Whether it's in the business world or in any sport, just a true leader, and again, the care factor. And I think by the end of the season, I think those guys just had more baseball in them
Yeah.
because they weren't worn down. He treated them right. He inspired guys and got the most out of guys. And uh, I don't, I think maybe the only time I saw him truly angry in 3 years was Harbor Yard had double booked, and I think Bridgeport was playing some other school. We were supposed to have BP, and he looked at me, goes, "TK, I'm really upset right now." I
Right,
think that
right.
was the extent of any meltdown I ever saw. So I think that consistency was really important for me in my coaching career at the time, because I think before that, at least as a player, I always responded to the stick more than the carrot.
Right, right.
And I think being around Coach G, you learn that not everybody's wired the same, and different players need different approaches.
Yeah, I mean, I keep in touch with a lot of Sacred Heart guys, and they all kind of say exactly what you said. Like occasionally, when they were actually playing for him, they were frustrated by, as probably most players are with most
Right.
head coaches. But I think years later, they look back and go, "He had our best interest at heart. He cared. He really did run the program, and gave him a lot of life lessons along the way." Um, After Sacred Heart, you move on to Marist,
Yep.
right? Okay. Um, Again, correct me if I'm wrong. Was that a job that was full-time baseball?
It was baseball only, yeah. And again, I loved Sacred Heart, loved working with you guys. Um, I think I had kind of reached the point, turning 30, and it was time to stop, having to wash football loops and fold towels at 5 in the morning,
Yes,
or
absolutely.
worrying about, soccer preseason orders when I'm, trying to run around Georgia.
Right.
It just became really difficult. And Chris Traz, again, another great baseball guy, took a shot on me, and I was able to go up there for a couple of years and learn under him. And that was my first baseball only job, and it felt like I won the lottery, after 3 years of pulling double duty.
Yeah, and it's funny. I think the world of baseball seems to have gotten a little better with like the volunteer spot gone and a variety of things. But most people, certainly most young people, are not aware how you got to pay dues if you want to be a college baseball
Sure.
coach. There's basically no way around it. So, right,
Right.
look at your journey, and now you're probably, if I'm correct on the numbers, you might be 6, 7 years in your coaching career before you get a full-time baseball only job.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the 2 years at Purchase, I was working in the res life, answering phones and doing clerical work. At DeSales University, I was working in a warehouse in the morning. And then at Sacred Heart, it was the equipment room. So yeah, it was the first seven years, having to, hustle and do some other things to make it possible.
Yeah, yeah, and for you, that wasn't working any less. It's just now you could work only on baseball, which
Right,
must have
right.
been what you finally, wanted to do. And then after Marist, you go to Hofstra,
Yep,
correct?
yep. Over to the coach Russo, and the other coach at the time was John 𝐸𝐵𝐿, former big leaguer, who was, man, unbelievable baseball coach, unbelievable competitor. We had Ronnie McKay the one year, who's Long Island baseball royalty, one of the better infield guys I've been around. So I was just a sponge for those 2 years, and really difficult conference in the CAA, and it was a little bit of a rebuild at the time with some talented players, and they were able to kind of put some things together and make a good run, and obviously what Catalinato has done there since being there is really impressive, because that's a neat place, and I think you can really recruit a tough, hard-nosed Long Island player there.
Yeah, it's funny. Russo and I were so close. And obviously he's not coaching unless he's gotten back into it that I don't know. So
Right.
yeah, and 𝐸𝐵𝐿 is certainly a legend too.
Yeah.
Um, Now, and of course, just I think this went without saying, but for people that don't know you enough, all your work at previously to we'll talk about the next job has all obviously been recruiting. You're working with catchers, you're working with hitters. Um, it's then when you make the move to Stony Brook now, if and I think I have this right, you go there as the pitching coach, correct?
I went there actually as assisting Jimmy Martin, helping with the catch, kind of
Oh,
being
you
a
did first. Okay.
hybrid. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Johnny
Okay.
Lewis was there at the time, served as the volunteer, because he had some other stuff going professionally, but was the primary pitching coach. It was after he left, first year after 2018 is when Coach 𝐶𝐭 kind of brought the opportunity to me, and it was some trepidation because, again, to steal the Tim McCarver Bob Gibson interaction, the only thing I knew about pitching at the time was I couldn't hit it. And Coach 𝐶𝐭 believed in me, and I think it was to try to create some continuity and they had some turnover in that position, rightfully so. They had some absolute all-stars as pitching coaches over a couple of years that went on, and had some other opportunities. But yeah, it was Coach 𝐶𝐭. My second year at Stony Brook is where I transitioned in the pitching role.
So I want to talk about that, but let's also talk about Coach 𝐶𝐭, just retired, legendary coach. Jim Martin has
Yeah.
been on this podcast, took over there. Um, you were at Stony Brook for, was it 3 years?
2018 to so it would be fall 2017 to summer 21.
Okay, yes. Obviously, 𝐶𝐭 again was there forever. Talk about transitioning from a program to D3 to
Right.
then D1, and of course going on maybe one of the best runs in sports in 2012 when they make it to,
Right.
College World Series. Incredible. How was it working with him?
There's no words. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. I mean, hold you accountable to be a better coach. The amount of pride he has in that program. It was, I loved every day of it. I really did. And always had your back. And man, what a competitor. What an absolute competitor. I think if he played tic-tac-toe with you, he'd try to kick your butt. Just an absolute competitor and in-game manager. And I mean, you talk about chess, not checkers, and he would see things, 3 innings before they happened. Just incredible. It was often in awe watching him work, and then obviously working alongside Jimmy was a dream come true because I mean we were assistants way back when we started, and he was at Southern Connecticut, and he's again tremendous competitor and hard-nosed guy, and I really enjoyed my time there.
Yeah, Jimmy's a really good baseball guy too. But let's back to the second part of it. I've over my life, just like you, have met many pitching guys that were catchers, and
Right.
certainly having caught gives you incredible insight into a good part of the job. Was was it hard a transition? Were you pumped to kind of go, hey, this far into my career, I got like a spark to learn something new? What was that like with that first
Yeah,
move?
it was definitely a transition. I think it helped that I was there for a year, and had a really good relationship with a lot of the pitchers already. I think, ironically enough, I think Rapsodo becoming really a staple at that time helped me out a lot because it's like, listen, this isn't my opinion, fellas. This is,
Right,
here are the numbers. I have a definite reverence for the position because I didn't play it. So I
right,
don't have the ability to say, well, when I pitched,
right.
again, it's got to be a collaborative process. And, I think they recognize that I cared a lot and what was willing to meet them halfway, no matter what it took for them to maximize their ability. So, yeah, there was some bumps in the road for sure, but, having somebody like Coach 𝐶𝐭 in your corner and having your back, again, that lends itself to instant credibility with, not only the current staff, but with recruits, because that was my biggest concern, because recruiting has been such a staple and important factor in my career that I was afraid that it would be used against me, right? That I'm recruiting this guy that I think could be a very impactful guy in the conference, and I don't have a real pitching background. I just started doing this, and again, I think when you have the logo on your chest and you had all these guys pitching the big leagues that came out of the program for the head coach, I think that protected me early on for sure, on maybe getting exposed.
Yeah, I mean, I do. I certainly want to talk some recruiting stuff, but I want to still kind of finish um, back to, to now where you are at GW. So you make the move to GW, where you've been since, I guess it's now, like you said, '01, correct?
Yeah, so it'd be fall
2021, I
if
meant to say.
21, so 22 is my first full season here.
Okay. And so start with this. Again, GW has a pretty good household name, really. It's a great institution.
Right.
I don't know enough about it, but can you, for anyone watching, we'll talk baseball program in a minute. Just tell us about the university.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm obviously situated in the Foggy Bottom section of DC, so we're just blocks from the White House and the monuments, and there's 7 undergraduate schools within the university, ranging from business to health sciences and everything in between, engineering, the liberal arts, 75 majors. So if we don't have it, it's probably pretty obscure.
Right.
And again, I think, no offense to all the other great cities out there, but it'd be hard to argue that we're not the most powerful city in the world. So I think it lends itself to bringing in student athletes that have some pretty big goals, pretty lofty goals, not only on the diamond, but professionally. This is the first time where I've been somewhere where those career development offices and those internships, those become very real. Because I think these athletes at GW see their classmates interning on the Hill or doing these really big time things with Deloitte and taking these meetings with these big companies. And they're like, I want to do that too. The competitor in them is like, I want that internship. So, I think, the burden to make the balance is on the coaching staff. You'll never be told you can't major in something. You'll never be told you can't take a class. We'll find a way to make it work because I think the balance that we can strike is something that can separate us from a lot of places.
And it's funny, I've spent not as much time as I would like in that DC area, but when I'm there, it is awesome, man. The
Yes.
architecture, it's just restaurants. I mean, it's a really, really cool city. Have you gotten to explore it even yourself? I mean, you're always working, first of
Yeah.
all, but when you're not, when the wife and kids go out and see the
Absolutely,
area?
yeah. Caitlin and I take the boys anytime we can. You could be here probably a decade and not be able to see
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
But no, it's really neat. And even when we have team functions down in front of the Lincoln Memorial, I think sometimes you take it for granted, and you see people visiting from all over the world. They're like, wow, this is a really special place, for sure. There's a real energy to it. But that being said, it is a very residential, welcoming city. I know. Obviously, if you're depending on your algorithm, it might seem like it's not with social media, but I love it. I really, really do.
That's awesome. Let's talk about the baseball program.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I've had my first guy that I worked with recruiting wise that committed as a 27. You did a great job with him. But just for people that don't know enough about the program, tell us about GW baseball.
Yeah, I mean, Coach Ritchie's an alum. He's in the Hall of Fame, since taking it over in 2012, 2013, has really elevated the facilities. As I mentioned, we were talking before, that's alumni engagement. He bleeds buff and blue. I mean, he is Mr. GW. He has a real affinity and love for that place, which has been a theme in my career and working for guys that they're all in on the school they're coaching at,
Right.
and I think the parents and their recruits see that very quickly. How special George Washington University is to him. Extensive career in professional baseball, and he's a pleasure to work for. Again, has gives me a lot of opportunity and a lot of responsibility. He has very clear expectations. Wants to win, but wants to do it the right way by bringing in some really good young people and trying to retain them. And, again, it might sound weird, but I'd like to think we're a program that allows guys to fail. The goal is that guys, maybe if they don't have the best freshman year imaginable, that they understand that there is a plan in place. And it's been exciting to actually be somewhere for multiple years and have the financial stability to do so. And to see guys come in as freshmen and maybe get knocked around a little bit and struggle, and kind of earn their stripes the good old fashioned way. And then now some of those guys are juniors and seniors now, and they're starting to enter into some pro ball conversations and better players in the conference. And that true growth has been a blast to be a part of.
I mean, in the way college baseball is since COVID, since all the different things, NIL portal, et cetera, it's gotten older and better. It's got to be the rare freshman that walks in and is an impact guy right away for almost anybody these days, right? So your point, if they don't fail and they don't have a chance to develop, it's not going to work many places, right?
Yeah, and I think the development word gets thrown around, and again, it is a big part of what we do, right? We're coaches, we coach, but I think you know I try to spend more time here looking at a guy's floor rather than a ceiling, right? I think if there's markers there that there's some athleticism, there's some fast twitch, that yeah, we can build upon that. But we want to try to recruit physicality and obviously develop it more once they're on campus. But if a guy just simply cannot get on the field as a freshman, his path to whatever his ceiling or upside might be, it's not going to be as quick as that guy that can maybe get out there and get some ABs and get some innings pitched. And you get better at doing something by actually doing it.
Yeah,
Again,
no.
bullpens and weight room and TrackMan, and yes, it's all huge. But to steal a line from our former boss, it all helps if you can pitch. It all helps if you can hit.
Right.
It's not a magic bullet.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Let's unpack recruiting a little bit. I don't want to, it comes up a lot on here, so I'm going to ask things kind of specifically to you and GW. I'm always fascinated how the two sides connect, meaning there are so many high school baseball players. Just take the class of 27, right? There's 10 million travel teams, there's a million camps, a million tournaments. You get emailed nonstop. It's kind of overwhelming, the sheer amount of kids. And then at GW, I'm guessing there's 4 of you that recruit. Is that fair to say?
Yep.
So for you specifically, how do you determine how I'm finding my pile of kids to go watch in the summer, who I'm going to make my phone calls to, or what are the methods by which you start to forget about offering and going to see, but
Sure.
what's the way that you start to compile who in the world I'm going to start looking at in the 27 or 28 class?
Yeah, I think you try to put in as many filters as you can, and try to pare it down a little bit, where if there's a list of 1,000 kids, if we can pare that down, slowly and surely, I think it just becomes easier, and you start kind of wasting less time.
Right.
The big one, the first one, is the city. We're not a traditional campus. We're not a
Right.
suburban campus. We are in the middle of a city. And that's, if there's any early reluctance or hesitation from a potential student athlete or their family, that kind of comes into their own list. They kind of
Right.
get pushed to the side a little bit, and not to say we won't circle back around and that they won't change their taste. But that's a big red flag. If the city's a little intimidating or not something that you envision yourself being happy in, they're not moving the university anytime soon. So that's a big one. The second one is academics. I mean, I know everybody's going to tell you academics are important. If you do not have a passion for academics, if you do not have lofty academic goals, we're going to waste a lot of each other's time here. We have a lot of really exciting, resources, whether it's academic support or career development, kind of to bookend your college experience. If you're not all in and really want to use the resources and going to push yourself, kind of next man up, right?
Right.
We want to coach baseball. We're very lucky to have a support staff. 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐿 in our academic support services for student athletes is an absolute rock star, and the job he does. But I want to talk to guys about baseball and getting better. If we have to pull you in about study hall or missing class or not turning work in, we can't do it. We can't do it. So again, and those red flags present themselves when you ask a guy what he's interested in academically, and you get kind of those generic responses, or it doesn't sound like there's a real passion there. Then I think again they gotta get put on that B list. But it's those guys that, oh, the DC is awesome. I want to be in a city. I want to be close to the action. I'm really excited about the business program. So and so, I know they're in business, and this is what I want to do in business. Those very kind of that specificity and that excitement is what kind of helps identify guys.
But let me ask you this too, which that was great. And you're right. And you said it earlier, to if it doesn't fit, if they're not looking for what you guys have to offer, forget it.
Right.
And I don't care if you're coaching in at whatever level, it's got to be a fit. But let me ask this and see what you say. Let's say you're going to Diamond Nation for Super 17. There's 120 teams in a 4-day tournament. Obviously, Kavanaugh is not walking in going, let's see, I like purple uniforms. Let me go over there and check out that shortstop. You're walking in with a list of kids that you want to see. How did that come about? Are these kids that came to your camp? Are these kids that maybe emailed you? Are these kids that a coach called about? Is this, this team and you've gotten players there before, and I'm going to go check them out because they've been good to us? How do you decide what I'm going to spend my time on over those 4 days?
Yeah, kind of all of the above. We have a database like a lot of programs do. We use 𝐼RMS, which is under the Teamworks umbrella now. So we're able to track, kind of keep internal lists of guys. And as you said, if they end up coming through a camp when they're a freshman or sophomore, and hey man, that's somebody we want to circle back around. Twitter X, whatever they're calling it these days, is a big one, because again, these guys are able to send you videos in real time, and so hey, that's a good looking swing. He's, I see, I'm going to be at Diamond Nation at the same time. then we'll try to make waves. But again, I think the relationships and the trust factor, when Wayne Mazzoni says, "Hey, I have a guy that I think would be a good fit," that means something. And that's not to take anything away from the guy that kind of reaches out of nowhere. But, truth be told, like I don't know you. I
Right.
don't know you, and I don't know that you've ever watched an Atlantic 10 baseball game. So when somebody that kind of comes out of the blue and says so and so would be a great fit for you, you kind of have to vet that a little bit, and it usually takes, one or two guys overselling somebody where you're like, I'm not necessarily going to buy into that. And having a little bit of longevity in this game and building some relationships. Although I'm starting to see some of the guys that were doing this when I came in with some travel teams are starting to hang them up. But you have a kind of a core group of people that you really respect and you trust their assessment of.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And to my side, I have no idea what in particular GW needs that year, all the things you said, academically, city, but I can identify saying, hey, this kid's in your range. Now you take it. You know better than I do, but I'm
Right.
not wasting your time to go watch this kid. And I think that's important, right? I mean, I've sent coaches to watch the same kid have pitch, six coaches, and two love him, two hate him, and two are
Sure.
like, I don't know, his breaking ball needs to get better, whatever. So beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I do want to ask you this because I think you're a tremendous recruiter, Kev. You're a great guy. You're smart. You're a great baseball guy. You work your butt off, but you are an elite recruiter. So I think, I could take a knucklehead 14-year-old and say, go to this field, and they could probably tell me who some of the better players are. So I don't want to ask you the basics. You did say physicality before, but is there anything you particularly like, position player, pitcher, that you're like, well, if this guy doesn't do this on the mound, if this guy offensively or defensively, is there anything that is particular to you or the way maybe you want to recruit at GW that's maybe something that's not standard?
Yeah, again, for us, as you said, I think anybody can identify the really talented kid, and I think you almost look for things not to like in them. You try to go from that range, right? Because it's easy to talk yourself into a guy that emails you and he calls you and he's very complimentary of your program, and it feels great. And I think being able to see guys multiple times, and I know, thankfully the NCAA stepped in and kind of slowed things down in the
Yeah,
last couple of years because it was really getting out of hand. It really became speed dating.
yeah,
There really was no courting process anymore. You had to make, these really split rash decisions on guys after seeing them in a really small setting. So I think being able to see guys a little bit, see how they deal with failure, and again, a guy may have be an absolute show pony, but if he's swinging and missing a lot at the high school level, it doesn't get any easier against better
yeah,
pitching. And on the flip side, if regardless of where your velo is now, if you're not generating swing and miss against the 7 through 9 hitters on an average travel team or an average high school team, it doesn't get any easier, as you kind of climb the ranks and go into the college game. So, I think looking for those markers that indicate true upside, and that's bat to ball skills, that's being able to run a little bit, that's being able to defend, and then on the mound, obviously, guys that can locate two pitches for strikes and generate some swing and miss.
I know this, for you specifically, because we've discussed this, not back when we were coaching, but since I've been doing the recruiting thing, is I know that obviously the academics have to check out, and then I know the kid has to be talented, but I know you're also trusting your gut of when you're actually on the phone and meeting this kid in person. Like, if it's not something, not that they have to be like an entertainer, but like
Right.
that goes a long way with you. Like, if someone's not talkative or if someone's conceited or whatever the case, like that will shut things down for you, correct?
I think you have to be able to communicate, because I will communicate directly with guys. And again, understanding, are they listening to the message and not just the delivery, like anybody. And, if it's in the seventh inning of a 2-run game, like we're going to get animated, we're going to get vocal, we're going to give you some feedback. Do you understand that's coaching and not criticizing?
Right.
Do you want to be coached? Do you want to be challenged? Or you just want to be celebrated? And if you do, that's fine. There's a lot of places that you can go and a lot of paths you can take, but um, I, I want you to come here because you trust us and you trust that we're going to put you in a position to be successful. And that's not always going to come in the form of really flowery compliments and pats on the back. It's going to come down to like, listen, that's not good enough. This is how we're going to get it better. Can you hear that and be able to do something with it other than shut down?
Yeah, no, that's excellent. I want to ask you this too, and I think this is all college baseball now, and I don't think GW is any different, but it seems, especially in my job talking to college coaches, it seems immediately after the season ends, and again, we're still on the recruiting topic. We'll talk some more coaching specific in a minute, but when the season ends, the first 2 or 3 weeks, you could probably care not much about what's going on with the high school recruits. You are trying to figure out your program for next fall.
Yeah.
Is anyone leaving? Are there transfers coming in? Is that fairly accurate that before you're out at the Diamond Nations in Georgia and all these different things, you're figuring out what the heck's going on for the roster for the next fall, correct?
Yeah, I think that's more than fair. I think the last couple of recruiting cycles have looked a little bit differently than, 10 years ago, where you're hoping you don't have to go to Battle of the Border in Port Chester because you're playing for conference championship and going to a
Yeah,
regional.
right,
No,
right.
yes, Super 17 and all those big tournaments, it has become, in some years are easier than others, and in some years you're having to go to some summer college wood bat games to see guys that potentially you wanna bring in and have to replace guys that are leaving. So, it has changed. It is, just my own opinion, a little unfortunate, but it is a way of the world now. And baseball is a game of adjustments, and we're all competitors, and we'll make the most of it. But that definitely has changed. There has been a shift for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to a number of coaches about it that are some at, at certain levels, some Division III programs, there's not a lot of transfer, so that's not a big part of it. Some coaches, just like you said, this is the rules we've been given. We have to adjust, and this is it. To cry about it or complain about it, it's not like you're going to be able to change it. Let's get into some coaching stuff. Did you change your coaching style at all when you switched to coaching pitchers, or you just been the same coach, or did you realize, hey, maybe it is different coaching pitchers, or you just been the same you?
Yeah, I think there's going to be that maturation process, and I think everybody evolves as a person and as a clinician and as a leader. I don't know if it was pitching specific, but again, as I said before, I leaned on the data a little bit because I didn't have the actual real world experience of pitching, and I think it leads to a little bit more of a collaborative experience. Like, listen, man, what this works for you. I'm not here to change that, but what can we do to enhance that or make that better? So I think that was probably the biggest adjustment was becoming more of a collaborator with athletes than, this is the way it is. You're going to follow this plan, because I said so. So
Yeah,
I think it's made me a better. I think it's made me a better baseball coach overall.
that's good. And I think, and I've heard this from a number of coaches, like I had Mark Calvi on, who's the head coach at South Alabama, former catcher, by the way.
Right.
And he's like, listen, you have to be able to speak in the modern technology things, but he goes, I also have to know which guy, if I say IVB, vertical break, like he's going to glaze over, and
Right.
which guy, if you don't say it, he's not going to, So I think, is it still your job to say, hey, I've got 18 pitchers and everybody gets coached a little differently based on their learning style or what they
No,
need?
absolutely, and where they're at in their career. If you have a young guy that's got some talent, and you just got to figure out how to get him to adjust to the college game. The last thing he needs to worry about is his pitch profile. He's got to worry about controlling his heartbeat and being
Right.
able to breathe and not hyperventilate. You sink to the level of your training, and I think, going back to what Coach G said, it all helps if you can pitch. I mean, if you can throw two pitches for strikes and get to both sides of the plate and spin a good breaking ball, control the running game, all the stuff we're looking for. Well, then now we can start working on the repertoire and building up some things on the pitch design front. But we got to make sure that you can go out there and navigate a college inning before we start worrying about everything else.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. One of the things I haven't coached now in 3+ years, and it's the greatest job. I loved everything about it. I still miss it. There's things I don't miss, but there's things I miss. But one of the things I always felt very difficult coaching pitchers compared to position coaches, maybe they have the same thing, I don't know, but you'd have a guy throw 7 unbelievable innings and a guy come in and reliever throw 2 great innings. Those two guys are pumped because they had
Right.
great outings. The team won, but there's three dudes that maybe were live for the day that
Right.
didn't get in because they weren't needed, and they're all pissed off. Like it
Right.
never seemed to be like the whole pitching staff was going to be happy at once.
Right.
Do you find that too?
No,
Like if you,
absolutely, and it's tough, right? It's a double-edged sword when, especially if you go on the weekend and you're lucky enough to get some length out of your starters. It's a lot of bullets that you didn't get to fire. It's a
right,
lot of guys that didn't get out there and be able to throw. And I know they want to help the team win, but we're being real with ourselves. They want to pitch. They want to go out there and they want to compete, and those are the guys we want. But yeah, if you're using 7+ guys on a weekend, either you have a really, really locked in staff with a lot of very specific roles, or it wasn't a great weekend. So, those weekends where you use 5 or less, it means you got some real length and some big time performances. But then on the flip side, there's 10 guys that didn't take their hands out of their pocket, and they're probably not too pumped.
right, and there's one mound, and unlike other
Right,
sports, where you could substitute in for 2 minutes in hoops, like
right, right, right,
baseball doesn't work that way. So
right.
the mental side of coaching pitchers and running that entire staff is interesting. How do you handle with the pitchers decisions about I'll just start with this, like summer ball, to play or not play in summer ball? Is
Yeah,
that something you as a coaching staff decide, or do you sit down and talk with the kid about what you think's best?
yeah. Again, I think you look at it in a calendar year, and I think if a guy is going to be surpassing 100 innings in 12 months, I think you have to take that into account and where he's at health wise. And I think if it checks one of two boxes, one, development, he really needs to go out there and have a few more outings, or have a bunch more outings and either work on something and to get ready for the next year. And I'm talking about the traditional exposure, professional exposure,
Right,
not other schools exposure.
right,
But if a
right.
guy has an opportunity to pitch in the Cape or pitch somewhere and really have a chance to be seen by professional scouts. But if it doesn't check one of those two boxes and that guy's throwing 100 innings plus in a calendar year, then we don't need to send you away just to send you away. We can get you ready for the next fall. So it's case by case. But again, I think it's got to either aid in your development or something that's going to put your name in on the map for professional opportunities.
Yeah, that's something I never had to deal with back when, was right. Hey, I'll send this guy to the Cape. Oh, he's not coming back now. Like
Right.
that doesn't sound like a fun thing. But all right, two more questions for you. I think they'll both be somewhat difficult. You've been at 7 different colleges. You're a really qualified guy. I also know you're the kind of guy who is not, hey, looking for the next gig. You're just busting your butt. Um, but you also have not been a head coach, and you're certainly qualified to be one. Do you think about that? Hey, and in 5 years, hey, I'm happy to be at GW. In 5 years, I'd like to be in a Power Four as a head assistant. Hey, I'll be happy to take a really good D3 job, or whatever the case is. Do you think about that at all, or do you just like, I'm going to be a good dad, a good husband, a good coach, and then tomorrow I'll figure things out?
Yeah, I think when I first started, the goal was head coach or bust, right? And so everybody wants to be in charge. They want to be the boss. Now, you kind of alluded to it. My quality of life, I couldn't ask for any more. My partner in crime, my best friend, my wife, has been unbelievable every step of the way. She's not a coach's wife, just like I'm not a risk management husband. We have our careers, and she's an absolute.
That's awesome.
She's my absolute biggest supporter, and without her, none of this would be possible. And I'm raising 2 sons with her, and man, I've been baseball's done more for me than I will ever be able to do for it. So I'm very, very grateful and really take it one day at a time. But the fact that I keep being able to put a uniform on and be paid, and I'm spoiled rotten. So it's just
Good
taking
for
it
you.
one day at a time.
And you know what it is too? I always felt this, that I think when you're also coaching pitchers, realistically, and of course your title is associate head coach, so I'm sure you're doing a lot of stuff, but you are really the head coach of the pitchers, the reality. You that in that group, yeah, you don't have the final say necessarily of starter. Maybe you do or not, whatnot. But the bottom line is when practice comes and the group gets divided, you're running that whole pitching staff. So theoretically, you are running your own group. So maybe it's different when you're one of 3 assistants coaching position players. I don't know. I've never done that side.
Right,
So,
right, right, right.
you know. All right. The other question then is, and sometimes I prep guys on this one, sometimes I don't. Shouldn't be that hard, but my audience of people watching are high school baseball players, they're parents of high school baseball players, they're coaches, aspiring coaches, etc. What I wanted to ask you is, if you had to either give advice to a high school sophomore or junior, or maybe better yet, if you could speak directly to Tyler Kavanaugh when he was 15, 16, younger, with the goal that he wanted to be a great, baseball player, is there anything that you would say, hey, these are one or two things that are kind of musts that you should be doing at that time to develop, to get the best out of yourself, that maybe you wish you would have done differently, or maybe you did do it and it's something you think still is important?
Yeah, I wouldn't want to talk to me at 15 or 16. I wouldn't want to deal with that. But another 15 or 16-year-old, and again, we get asked advice all the time, and people ask about metrics, and I think the things you need to lock in on: your GPA, your caloric intake, and your hours of sleep. I think those are the really good baselines that create some really good habits that you're going to be able to kind of build from there. And again, the game will tell you where you belong. And I think you try to slam a round peg into a square hole, it's not going to work. And I think if you are a guy that is going to have an opportunity to play at a quote unquote high level, you'll know pretty quickly. There's a lot of eyes out there, and there's a lot of ability to be seen by a lot of schools. So I think ultimately the game will tell you where you're going to kind of fall out at, and understanding, steal a line from another mentor. You can't evaluate the value of a program based on the division. And that's something that I really believe. Again, I started for 4 years. I got to be in the lineup every day for 4 years. That would not have happened at a lot of other programs. And I liked playing baseball. I wanted to be on the field as much as possible. So that was something that was very important to me. So I think being true to yourself and what you really want to glean from your college experience, and that's get on the field somewhere you're going to be able to be challenged, but have at least a reachable goal of seeing the field sooner rather than later. But again, going back to, yes, the track man, the data, the weight room, all that stuff's really important, but you have to have really good, strong baseline academically, getting enough rest, and then being able to take care of your body before you do anything else.
Yeah, I'm torn a little bit on metrics. I know it's of course important, but back to what you were saying, that the metrics are good if you could pitch. Metrics are good if you can hit. Like, there are kids, and I get it. Like, if you and I were growing up in this world and we saw exit velo, we would be telling everyone to exit, and we would be trying to get better exit velo. But it doesn't always mean you're a better hitter, right? Like, and I remember back in my days of recruiting, and you'd be talking to these people that are recommending players, and I got this guy that does this, and and then I would just simply say to them all the time, and just say this: Coach, you got one game to win. Who's getting the ball on the mound?
Right.
And you got to drive a huge run in. Who's at the plate?
Right.
I don't care that much about anything else. It's right. Like a guy we had in common, Troy Scribner, who threw 82 when he came into college, and who left throwing upper 80s and didn't even get drafted, had to sign as a free agent, made the big leagues. Put every metric on that kid, and it would say he's no good, except he was great, right?
Absolutely. It's unbelievable. And then the Scribner story that I always tell everybody, and he had mono, and thankfully his spleen wasn't enlarged enough. He was able to compete and went out through a CG on a Friday, and I'm in the equipment room doing laundry, and I hear metal clanking, and I walk through the weight room, and he's squatting at 9 o'clock at night in the dark in the pit center, and like, there's no way to measure that, man. That's a different cat, and that's a guy that obviously what he achieved was no surprise to me and you, but a lot of people from the outside be like, oh, how the heck did he make it all the way to the big leagues? That's how, the want to was just bigger than everybody else's.
There was a couple of things. I'm glad you brought that up, because this is a good way to sort of end this. But number one, that kid came from a baseball family. Mom would play baseball. Dad would play baseball. Brother made the big leagues. The kid had pitchability and what's between his legs that I don't want to say. And so hard stuff to coach, right? And then that game in particular, there was two other things about that game that are worth telling. Number one, Bryant, who he beat, was on a 21 game winning streak. Who wins 21 games into college level anywhere? Nobody. And he's coming off that mono. And so, I kept going up to him and say, like, his pitch count was getting high, and I'm like, Troy, he goes, Maz, get the heck away from me, dude. Like,
Yeah.
I am not coming. Like, truly, he was not coming out of the game.
Right.
And then, right, lucky that you, not lucky for you that you were working late at night after that game, but you sent me that picture, and I go, there's a champion. That's like
Yeah.
that's what
Different.
really it's all about. So
Not to mention he voluntarily played first base the one year when we lost Griff.
that's right.
Yeah.
And he can switch hit. He can play. I mean, the slowest dude you could ever be in terms of speed, but the kid could play baseball. But
You ask a lot of places, their Friday guy, hey, I need you to play first base on Saturdays. They look at you like you get three heads. Right.
Exactly. All right, Cav, you're the man. Thank you.
This is a pleasure. I appreciate you.
Yeah, I hope your first podcast was not that painful. Like I said, just a couple of dudes talking
Well,
baseball.
you've had some absolute monsters on here, so hopefully you don't lose any subscribers because of me. But this was fun. I appreciate you.
Yeah, and you know what though? Back to that, like I've had Rob Vaughan from Alabama, and like you know why he's Rob Vaughan from Alabama? Because he's a regular dude.
Yeah.
He's nothing. That's what you learn when you meet some of these great people. They're just really good people, and
Yeah.
they're not any different. But thanks so much for coming on, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Mess.
Yep. Well, thank you all so much for listening to this episode of the Game Plan Podcast. Again, this is your host, Wayne Mazzoni. For more information about my company, please visit collegebaseballadvisor.com. I hope you enjoyed today's episode with Tyler Kavanaugh, Associate Head Baseball Coach at GW. I'd like to remind you that this podcast is generously sponsored by the World Baseball Coaches Convention. It takes place January 15th to 2026 at Mohegan Sun. It's January 15th to 17th, 2026 at Mohegan Sun. They're in their 23rd year running this event. If you go to baseballcoachesclinic.com, you will see the list of speakers, the schedule. Really important too is if you go to this event, not only do you, of course, attend, but you get all the videos of all the events. Of course, when you're there, if there's 3 or 4 speeches going on at once, you can only sit on the one that you're at. But if you get the recordings to all the events, which is really, really worth the price of admission alone. So for more information, visit their website, baseballcoachesclinic.com, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the podcast. Thank you.